So you've increased your fundraising goal. Yay! So now the question is, well, how do I assess my progress towards that new goal? What metrics do I need to be putting in place such that I understand where I am along the way throughout the year, so I'm not at the end of the fiscal year trying to figure out, oh gosh, how do I get there? What else do I need to be doing and pulling out of this particular bag? My name is Tiffany Harris. I am the owner and principal consultant with Carmel and Associates. We work alongside nonprofit organizations and independent schools to help you raise more money and to feel confident in doing so. So let's talk about fundraising metrics and let's talk about assessing your fundraising progress. So before we dive into the nitty-gritties of metrics and each little thing that we think is a great idea to be tracking, let's talk about something called benchmarking. All right. Now, benchmarking is setting points throughout the course of your year to be able to track yourself to assess, I am where I need to be. All right. You don't want to do it just at the end of the year. Do it certainly halfway through the year. You may want to even think about doing it perhaps quarterly. Where am I? Are we there? All right. Because then you can say, yes, I'm there. We're on track. Fantastic. No, I'm not. Let's make some course corrections perhaps. All right. So benchmark is important. Now, in order to do benchmarking and to do it really well, you want to look at what you've been doing. Yes, I know you have a new goal. You want to raise $50,000 more this year, but you still need to look at where you have been so that you can see what is typical for your organization. At Carmel and Associates, we call that your fundraising audit. All right. And we do those. We look back and we say over last year, even 3 years, 5 years, what are the trends that we typically see? What are their bumps? In the, when you bump up in your fundraising, how much do you typically raise? Who is it coming from? All these different questions that we like to answer. Okay. So take a look backwards first and then assess along the way of this makes sense of where we have been. All right. Now, also you need to bump it up a little bit because you obviously have a new goal too, and be realistic in those things and have some strategies behind it. Today, we're not talking about strategy. We're purely talking about those metrics you need to be tracking. So let's dive into metrics. All right, so here's one of them. And another thing. I always say, when you're talking about metrics, you want to do year-over-year comparisons. What do I mean by that? A year-over-year comparison just means that you're looking at not just what you're raising this year, how many donors this year, but you also want to look at what did you do last year? That way you have a good comparison. You can say, yep, we're on track. Yep, we're ahead. Oops, we're a little bit below, but we know why perhaps, right? Or you can figure out why. So year-over-year comparisons for all these things that we're going to be talking about, all right? If you're working out of a spreadsheet, just have one column for, 2021 and another column for 2022 or however you're going to be assessing things. So one thing, this is an obvious one, total raised. How much money are you raising at this point? Year to date, where are you so far? That's one of the metrics that you really do need to be getting at, okay? Basics. How much money? Total raised. Number of donors, all right? How many people have given? Now, number of donors is different than number of gifts. Here's why. Number of gifts, now you can track both, and I suggest tracking both, but number of gifts will actually say if somebody has given more than once. Let's say I make a gift to your organization on Giving Tuesday, and then I come back again during your spring appeal. I've now made 2 gifts to your organization, but I'm just one donor. So you can track donors, you can track number of gifts. I love tracking donors because you really see, well, have my donors fallen off? Where does that numbers go, all right? But tracking gifts also gives additional information too, and it can be quite useful. It's actually one of those things that another metric that I like to look at is repeat gifts. How many repeat gifts are you getting? And if you're doing more than one appeal, you typically will start seeing repeat gifts, particularly if you are including everybody in your appeal every single time and not pulling out those folks who have already given. So repeat gifts is another metric that you can actually assess to see, well, how many repeat gifts did we get last year at this point in time? How many repeat gifts have we gotten this year? Now, be careful with repeat gifts because that's not something you really want to do on a monthly basis, all right? Repeat gifts typically come over the course of your year. That may be something that you look at maybe halfway through a year, but also towards the end of your year, okay, a metric. So we talked about total dollars raised. We talked about number of donors. We talked about number of gifts. Let's move on to LIBUNs and SIBUNs, right? Strange words, strange acronyms, all that stuff. A LIBUN. is someone who gave last year but not this year. Pretty simple. So again, think about 2021, 2022. Have they given yet in 2022? If not, they're a LIBON. Now, that doesn't mean that they won't give in this particular year. They just haven't done it quite yet. All right. And what you want to think about with LIBONs is you'll start seeing patterns for most of your donors. Most people will give around the same time of year. If you've noticed that the person for the last 5 years, let's say, always gives before the end of the year, so before December 31st, that's their time period, holiday season, giving season, they're always in. And you've noticed this year it's January or even February, right? Or even frankly towards the end of December and they're not in yet, and you know they typically give early in December. Hey, maybe they need a little bit of a nudge. Maybe they need a little bit of a call, an email, an outreach of some sort. So LIBONs, right? Now SIBONs. SIBONs are those folks who gave not last year, but gave at some point other time, all right? But not this year. So they may have given, it depends on how you pull your reports and what you do, how you do your assessments. They may have given 2 years ago. They may have given 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They gave some point in time in the near future, right? Or not near future, but in the in their most recent past. But they just haven't given quite this year. These are great things to track because again, you get to see, well, who has given? Who do I need to nudge? Who do I need to check in with? Why am I $15,000 off? That's why, because they gave last year, but not quite this year, that one particular donor, or maybe those 3 donors, right? Assessments, tracking, metrics, where are you? Some other things. Increased giving. I love this one, all right? I love seeing how many folks have increased their gifts. Who has increased their gifts even? Being able to thank somebody because they've increased their gift. They've gone from 1,000 to 1,500 this year, right? And maybe you didn't notice it quite when it first came in, but you've pulled a report on this particular thing. It's fantastic to be able to look at who has increased their gifts and also by how much. Easy stuff to do. You could do it within Excel. You put a little formula in and you can see who's increased their gifts. Now, increased gifts is something that I like to pull on more of kind of like halfway through the year, all right, versus every single month because, you can look at data forever, but I don't suggest doing it all the time, okay? So look at increased gifts on occasion, see who's increased their gifts, great opportunities to go thank some people and talk to some folks at that point in time. You also can see who's gone down a little bit, maybe have a conversation then too, or perhaps you may know why they've gone down. So we've talked about number of donors, we talked about LIBONs, SIBONs, we've talked about increased gifts, we talked about repeat donors already. Now here's one, new gifts. You want new donors. I'm assuming you do. You may not actually. It depends on your strategy, right? You may be saying, well, we're trying to just increase the current donors we have, increase their amount given. So that may not be as important, right? Perhaps not. But if you're trying to grow, you're saying, I want to raise, let's go back to $50,000 this year, $50,000 more, let's say, right? If that's the case, well, perhaps you are looking for more new donors. Who are your new donors? So that's something you could be tracking, all right? And then here's something else, track by constituency. Now, depending what organization you are, you may not have a vast group of constituencies. It may not vary too much. But if you're a school, let's say an independent school, you have parents, you've got alumni, you've got grandparents, you've got friends of the school who like to donate. What are their giving categories? How much are those current parents giving? How much have alumni given? And also, again, where do they fall on all these different metrics that we've talked about already? That's important stuff to know. So in thinking about all these things, there's something else here, all right? We talked about your constituent base, right? But what about selecting out a subset of donors? What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you are interested in increasing your mid-range donors. Okay, you've got your major gifts going, you're paying attention to them, they're golden, you're like, I've gotten everything settled with them. Fantastic. Now, what about those mid-range folks? People that come between, and every organization is different, all right? But let's say mid-range for you may be between $500 and $5,000, okay? Those particular donors. You're noticing that sometimes they kind of go up and down. You're not really doing much with them because you're focusing on your big time folks, okay? You can start tracking those specific people. Anybody who gave last year, last 2 years, at that particular range between $500 and $5,000, $500 and $2,500, whatever you want to say. Who are these folks? When did they give last? Who are they? Are they coming up on your LIBON lists? Have they increased their donor? Have they increased their amount given at all? Have they, how much total raised have you gotten for this particular group compared to last year? All right. So there's lots of different metrics, lots of different things that you could be looking at depending on what your goals may be and what your strategies are as well for trying to get to those goals. Okay. Lots of things to think about. I encourage you to consider different things. Play around with a few of these different things. You don't have to do just one. You don't have to do all of them either. And again, think about what makes sense for your organization and also what makes sense throughout the course of the year, okay? Because it's not like you should do everything all the time. Maybe some things are on a monthly basis. Maybe other things are on a quarterly basis. Yeah, we've talked about the different metrics. Here's something that is a key takeaway. You've got your data, all right? You've got your KPIs, key performance indicators. You know what you're looking at. The question is, what are you going to do with that stuff? Great to look at data. Fantastic. You've been staring at spreadsheets every quarter. So now what, right? What do? You take action of some sort. What does that action mean? What does it look like? Let's say this. You were trying to increase your amount raised. You've done that. You wanted to increase your number of donors. Hey, look, you're there. You've met those benchmarks. You're there. Fantastic. Give yourself a pat on the back, brush the shoulders off. You've done a great job. But now look at those details. Well, pick out a few donors. Who's actually increased their gifts? Hey, you got somebody from $500 to $1,500. Pick up the phone. Give them a call. I just want to say, just notice that, I saw your gift come in. It's so fantastic. We want to thank you for your increased gift. It really is truly special. Thank you so much. You can do that yourself as the gift officer, as the development director, as the CEO even of your organization. But here's something else you can do. Get your board involved with these kinds of calls. Those thank you calls are so wonderful. Who doesn't want to hear thank you so much? They're the nice, easy calls, and frankly, a lot of them go to voicemail anyway, which gets picked up and still has the same touch, right? Get your board involved. If your board is helping you make some of those phone calls, first of all, you're actively engaging your board, right? You're giving them, I don't say work to do, they don't just need work, but it's important work. If somebody hears from one of your board members a nice thank you, that makes their day. They've been thought about. Somebody cares about them, all right? And not just the person asking for the gift already, but somebody else, okay? What about writing special notes for these people as well, okay? A little special note perhaps can go in if you're doing on a weekly basis some things, or who gave $500 and above, let's say, remember that band of donors I was talking about, those constituents you're trying to track by group. If you notice that person gave a gift, you can write a special note. Thanks so much. We've really been, we're so excited to have you this year. You're as a new donor, something like that on their acknowledgement letter, a phone call from you, perhaps. Thank you so much. So great to talk to you. I just love to have a conversation with you. Perhaps we can have some coffee as well. There you go, right? Other things that you can do to thank people or just to stay engaged with some of those folks. If you do a report of gifts, if you do an annual report or a report of gifts, why not put a little note in that? Your little note says something similar. Here's the page you're marked on. Didn't want to, your little sticky note on that particular page. Thanks so much. We couldn't have done it without you. We appreciate your support. Simple as that, right? But you've been tracking things. You've been paying attention to people. You can now write those little special notes on there for them. All right. So you can assess now what you've been doing great. All right. You congratulate yourself, all that good stuff. And now you're like, well, I've also been tracking some stuff. And guess what? Some things aren't so great. What are you going to do about those? Well, let's look at your LIBONs, right? You realize that last month there were 10 LIBONs. People who didn't come in. They came in the previous year at that same time period, but not this particular year. You say, you know what? Well, 2 of those folks I've already been in touch with. I know their stories. They're waiting on their bonus to come in. They're good, right? Maybe the rest of them, you're not sure. Again, time to reach out. Great opportunity to have a conversation with them and say, hey, noticed in the last 5 years you've been such a loyal donor. We really appreciate it. And we just noticed we haven't given quite yet. How are you doing? What's going on? Have an open, frank conversation with your donors. And it doesn't always have to lead with the donor. With the gift itself. Again, just want to check in. How are things going with you? You've been such a great donor. Da da da. Okay? Different things that you can do to say thank you to folks, or to assess folks, or to check in with people because you've been tracking things properly. Now, if you found this information helpful, if you found it useful in any way, like it, all right? Like it, leave us a comment. And if you have questions, whether it's about tracking, whether it's about metrics, whether it's about strategy even, we can get into some of that stuff. We love a good strategy session. Then reach out, DM me, all right? Private message me. Love to talk to everybody. Or you can email me personally as well. Tiffany Harris with Carmel & Associates. So my email is tharris, THARRIS, at carmelandassociates.com. One final thing, again, if you found it useful, you think somebody else can use this information, share it with them too. All right? Thanks, and we'll see you soon. Take care.